Irrational Atheist. Thanks for making a response. Even if it was a little condescending, I still like video responses, so I appreciate it. So it's nice to see you finally on camera. I'm bickering with you over comments, so nice to see a face on the user. And okay. So anyways, the first thing I noticed when I watched your video is you said that Dorapoden, I don't know exactly how you say his name, owned me. Really? We agreed on everything. I just did a very bad job of that video. I just used a very bad cliche that I'll probably never use again. You can't prove a negative. That's just not true. You're right. You can't prove a negative. All you do is show logical inconsistency, and I already knew that. I just didn't really think enough about the cliche. I was just trying to put in simple words that you can't really disprove something that doesn't have logical inconsistencies. In the sense that, unicorns, they don't have any logical inconsistencies. They could totally exist in our natural universe. We just don't have any evidence of them. And because of that, we just count them. In fact, think about it. Why don't you believe in fairies? If I give them minimal aspects, just say they transcend the universe, and we cannot sense them, but they do exist. How can you disprove their existence? You can't. They may exist. You can't sense them. They just transcend the universe. I mean, you can't know if they exist or don't exist. But do you believe in them? No. At least I hope not. Hope you're not that gullible. But do you discount them so they cannot exist? If further evidence came out, I believe in fairies. I just need the evidence. So in that sense, you're an agnostic atheist. And that's pretty much the same reasoning I go through with God. I cannot rule him out. I don't say God cannot exist. I'm not a hard atheist. That's not hard atheism, by the way. I'm not a Gnostic atheist. I'm an agnostic atheist. I made a video about this. It's called Religious Terminology. It explains positions, at least how I define them. And this isn't a positive claim to say that I don't believe in something, but I'm just not completely sure. That's exactly the default position with any supernatural claim. So it's not a positive claim. It's in fact the default position. If you want to argue with that, good luck. Because unless you can explain the position you really are in when you talk about fairies, I mean, it's agnostic atheism. I don't know how you can differentiate it. Then you talk about how I'm so pissed off in the video. And I don't know how I come up on YouTube. If you knew me, that's not pissed off. No. I don't really get pissed off. I'm a little frustrated with Dr. Craig, that's for sure, but I'm not pissed off at him. I don't even really dislike him. I just don't like him much as a philosopher, and that's kind of my own personal opinion. Just thrown out there. And you also, of course, Dr. Craig kind of goes back and forth between a Christian God and a deistic God. A deistic God I can't really argue against, because a deist will often just remove all logical inconsistencies he can possibly find. Say that, well, we do live in a universe where there seems to be evil, so he's probably not loving, probably doesn't intervene. See, that's the kind of thing. You can start removing qualities from God, redefining once you start finding logical inconsistencies. And you can define God at certain points where he has no logical inconsistencies. If I found logical inconsistency in your God, you redefine him. There's almost no point. I mean, if you give him omniscience, omnipotence, we can start talking, but if you don't, I'm stuck in the dark. If you say he's just this uncaused cause, well, I might even give that to you. I mean, that's kind of the point, though. I don't know if I would say that's really God. It could easily be a singularity or something else, a vacuum fluctuation. It's hard to say. But, yeah, it's kind of ridiculous to say that you can always find a problem with God. You can't always find a problem with God. God might actually, this concept of God, this deistic concept of God, just the uncaused cause, might exist. I'll concede that. I would concede that before I made the video. I mean, it's totally possible. I can't really argue with deists. There's really no point to it. Normally, there's just nothing really there. Okay, so, also, you said that there are no Muslims in the U.S. Senate, and there aren't T-Rexes. You don't know that. You really don't know that. You think there aren't any U.S. Muslims in the Senate. But you could be mistaken. There could be a global conspiracy. It's not likely, but it's possible. Also, you don't also take into account that your senses could fail, and that you could be wrong. It could be possible you live in a world of solipsism. You need to take that into account. You can't really be certain about it. It's totally possible. There are Muslims in the U.S. Senate. It's very unlikely. It's to the contrary of the evidence, but it doesn't mean that it can't be. It could quite possibly be. You just can't really know that. But you have to claim some amount of certainty, and there's a good amount of certainty that there are no Muslims in the U.S. Senate, because you can look at the roster. But the roster might be wrong, and you just never really know. So I'm just going to throw out there that T-Rexes could exist in places you haven't been. So you can't really claim much certainty on that. I don't think that's what you mean by logical consistencies. I think you meant more like square circles. And I, of course, agree with that. Square circles cannot exist. And, yeah. Anyways, you said that Dr. Craig is smart. I'm going to backpedal and say that I think he is probably a pretty smart guy. Does that make him any more right? Does it make him any more valid? Does it make him a good philosopher? No, not necessarily. He, as a philosopher, is completely based upon what he says. If it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad. And that reflects directly upon him. It doesn't matter how much education he has. So, I mean, I don't care how smart he is. He probably is a smart guy. He's probably a really nice guy, too. And, yeah, that's all I'd say, really. Then, resurrection video. I made a resurrection video. It's something like, you can't believe in the resurrection through testimony. Go check it out. I mean, it's not necessarily arguing historical facts, but it's basically comparing, using an analogy, that the historical evidence for Jesus will never be enough. It just isn't possible to be enough unless you are gullible enough. And watch the video and you can reply to it and maybe make a video response if I'm wrong. Find out a flaw in my logic. I'd like to know if that argument is valid, because I think it's a pretty good argument, but I mean, I think it is a valid argument. I just wonder what theists actually think about it. So, yeah. And then, was I strawmanning the Kalam cosmologic argument? Damn straight I was. You're completely right. I completely strawmanned the Kalam argument. Thank you for calling on me. I got hell over in my video. Yeah, I completely strawmanned the cosmological argument. The Kalam cosmological argument. In fact, yeah. So, you are completely right, and I will have to make another video specifically trying to give my position on the Kalam argument. And I was only really discussing the classic cosmological argument, which I constantly mistake Mr. Gray for using. I thought it was just a revamped version. Technically it is, but I thought that the same exact replies could be used, and they can't necessarily be used. I think the classic cosmological argument isn't really all that impressive, but I guess maybe I'll make a video on that too, just to be very clear on it. But not in this video, this is just a response. Anyways, the uncaused cause. Well, you assert that as God, but I'm not so convinced. If you look at quantum vacuum and quantum fluctuations, it's quite possible that it came out of necessarily nothing. And maybe that's the uncaused cause. And there is empirical data for this. Now, you may not want to accept that. You may want to call that God. But what can you do? Also, the singularity could quite possibly be the uncaused cause as well, especially if you define God as very minimally as you possibly can. Another question I have for all theists who might be watching this is, I would love to know what God created the universe out of. I mean, I'm just always kind of curious about this. Did he create it out of himself? I mean, did he create it out of nothing? Isn't usually the theist who says that something can't come from nothing? Can God defy logic? Because you might run into some problems if that's the case. Kind of interesting, you throw dilemmas with logic, where, how do you know what's true is true if God can make it true? Interesting question. Anyways, is God applied to, like, the law of thermodynamics? I don't know if it's actually a naturalistic law. Maybe, maybe not. I mean, does he need to consume things to keep going? Just throwing a question out there. See if maybe you'll answer it, maybe someone else will. So, that's my video response. Take it easy.